Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Good afternoon, I'm Jeanette Semperville and I'm the Executive Director for Bottom Line Massachusetts and a proud alum. Welcome to our panel discussion on public and private partnership to foster educational equity and economic inclusion. For those of you less familiar with Bottom Line, we support first generation to college students from low income backgrounds to get into college, graduate, and establish themselves in a mobilizing career. This year, Bottom Line Advisors are helping more than 3,000 students, providing individualized access program support to get into college and ongoing college and career support through our Success and Career Connections programs. 76% of our students graduate college within 6 years, and that's double the national average. And on average, our students are earning double their family income in the first job out of college. Such a great reason for us to celebrate. And this work is possible due to the strong relationships and partnerships we have developed with local and state government agencies, community organizations, and corporate partners. So thank you everyone, staff, students, alumni, and corporate and community partners for joining us for what we hope will be an informative and interactive discussion about how the public and private sectors can continue to foster partnerships and promising initiatives to move towards a shared goal of greater educational and economic equity and inclusion. We hope to get to all of your questions, so please share them in the chat box below and we'll ask them later on in the program. But before we do, I am so excited and so very grateful to introduce our four panelists this afternoon. Thank you and welcome to Senator Sonia Chan Diaz, our very own Massachusetts State Senator, Claire Shaw, National Director of Programs and Corporate Philanthropy at the Liberty Mutual Foundation, Juan Cantu, Program Officer, Education to Career at the Boston Foundation, and Jessica Pierre, Director of Strategic Communications at the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts. She is also the Chief Executive Officer for Jessica Pierre Communications and a Bottom Line alumna. There is something truly so remarkable about having these four successful and talented leaders taking the time this afternoon to share their experience and vision for this work, as well as equity-centered policies, practices, and cross-sector collaborations with proving impact, especially with the heightened and ongoing challenges we're all facing amid the COVID-19 pandemic. We will have each panelist quickly introduce themselves before kicking off the panel. So we can start with Senator Chan Diaz.
Hi, I must say good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be with you. It's great to see my fellow panelists. Special hello to Claire. So I'm delighted to be here with you guys. As you heard, my name is Sonia Chan Diaz. I serve the 2nd Suffolk District in the State Senate, which is all within the city of Boston, basically a swath of Boston that extends from the South End out to Mattapan and Hyde Park. And for the last 13 years or so, I've been serving in the Senate, primarily focused on issues of education policy, education equity, criminal justice work, economic equity and economic justice. And I'll leave it there because I want to leave the most time possible for discussion. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. Claire?
Hi, how are you? It's great to see everyone and welcome, Congresswoman Diaz. It's great to see you, Senator, sorry. Yes, we are having a wonderful time here at this panel, so good afternoon. This is very exciting. As Jeanette said, Claire Shaw, I've been at Liberty Mutual 7 years in June. Liberty Mutual was begun in 1912. The foundation was established in 2003. And last year, specifically, it distributed $40 million through the foundation and another $24 million through charitable endeavors from the company. Our 3 major cities where we give are Boston, Seattle, and Dallas. And Our 3 areas of focus are homelessness/security, with a special focus on youth homelessness and offering support for programs and services for unaccompanied youth. Accessibility, which I know is close to Sonia's heart because she heads up that Commission on Disability, so that's wonderful. And also education, which is one of the reasons we're here to speak today, and it's long been a focus of Liberty's work. And the Boston Foundation and many others have come together to support many of the great organizations and partners in Boston, like Bottom Line and HERC, et cetera. So we're excited to talk about this today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Juan?
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Juan Cantu. I am a program officer with the Boston Foundation on their education and career team. And one of the things I do is I help oversee our Success Boston program, which is a college completion initiative made up of TBF, the City of Boston, a bunch of higher ed institutions, and some very important nonprofit organizations like Bottom Line, which for the past 13 years, we supported more than 6,000 students from BPS and public charter schools as they headed from high school to college. So just very proud of the work we've been able to do. And as a first-gen college student myself, it's due to these programs that I was able to have my own success. So thank you for having me. And yeah, looking forward to speaking with everybody.
That's awesome. Thank you. Jessica?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really honored to be here in this space with you all. Like Jeanette said, my name is Jessica Pierre. I serve as the Director of Strategic Communications at the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, also known as BECMA. We are a statewide organization that works to advance the economic well-being of Black people across the Commonwealth. And I also run a boutique PR agency called JPR Communications, where we work with political figures, nonprofits, and social impact brands that are looking to engage with Black and Brown communities online and in the media. But the hat that I'm really, really proud to wear today is being a Bottom Line alumna. I graduated from Brighton High School back in 2009, so I'm a product of Boston Public Schools, and then I went on to the University of Massachusetts Amherst to get my bachelor's in political science back in 2013. So I too am a first-generation college graduate, first person in my family to have a salary job. So I'm here to really bring a human perspective to a lot of these issues that we're going to be talking about, to put a face to these issues, because we talk a lot about numbers and statistics, but sometimes it's really hard to look at it through more of a human lens. So I hope to be able to bring that voice and share the experiences that I've had, but also a lot of my peers have had as well too, in navigating education and navigating the workforce and just trying to mobilize economically.
Awesome. Thank you so much, panelists, for being here. And I'm so excited to hear all of your insights. I know that we don't have a lot of time, so let's begin the discussion. And I definitely would want to encourage you to please keep your responses to around 1 minute or so if you can, because I know this is a very heavy conversation, so looking forward to hearing from you. So the first question I'll direct to our senator, just want to know, what do you think is the value of facilitating public and private sector collaboration to tackle the chronic challenges of educational and economic inequity and exclusion?
Jeanette, I just want to check, sorry, did I hear you say that's directed to me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't want to kill someone else's mic.
No, you're good.
So what is the value? I mean, tremendously valuable, tremendously important. To state, I think the answer that we probably all, agree on coming in here. On sort of multiple points on the spectrum, right? We need to have buy-in from all of our stakeholders, all of our funders, right, in Massachusetts, and that includes the corporate sector as well as individuals who are all of whom are taxpayers that fuel our public education system. We need to have it at the sort of, in the middle of the spectrum, where I'm thinking about the sort of like the delivery pipeline, have those strong partnerships between public schools and also employers, because we know that for so many students, that hands-on education is such a strong shot in the arm for them about the relevance of education and for cultivating that hopeful vision and that realistic hopeful vision of the future for them, of what's within reach and what excites their imagination and their intellectual curiosity. And then, having the strong sort of connection on the, what I'll describe as the back end of the pipeline, right? When students are graduating, whether it's, out of vocational education programs or out of college or out of certification programs, that we have those strong linkages so that we are preparing our young people for the jobs of the future and providing those sort of smooth on-ramps to employment.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Senator. And I love it. A lot of it resonates with me. It's the wraparound. It's the collaboration with all the stakeholders as well that's going to get us there. Thank you for that. Would any other panelists like to weigh in on that question before I move on to the next one?
Sure. I would say that I agree with the senator about the point she's made. And I think that corporate funding can certainly have some benefits in terms of offering support for some R&D and some of the initial pilot work that frequently has to happen in order to foster good collaboration. I also think corporations have a role to play because they know their hiring patterns and what they're hoping to find in candidates. And we have a lot of successful organizations here in the Boston area that have worked closely with corporations to actually back map their needs to training. And particularly as we move to more of the early college and the college to career training, I think that's going to be even more helpful in the tech and biotech worlds. And thirdly, there's the human element. I mean, Liberty has had a 47-year history of partnership with Charlestown High School. And as recently as 2 weeks ago, I was on a call with about 70 Liberty employees who were interested in getting the preliminary information about what it would take to be math mentors with children at Charlestown. Now, all of those 70 may not be able to make that final step, but just that level of engagement means that personal connection with students has a good opportunity to improve their performance in math, and also the fact that someone's taken an investment in them and someone's interested, which I think can often make a big difference. We're fortunate in this area that we have the level of collaboration and connection that we have.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Other thoughts? That's awesome.
Yeah, I would agree with Claire and with Senator Chang Diaz. I think as a funder, we have the ability, to take those risks and fund those pilot programs that Claire was mentioning. I know at TBF, we recently funded a community college program that supports internships and really strong collaboration with corporate partners, with businesses. So I think without being able to have funders like Liberty or TBF or many others in the Boston and greater Boston area, it's harder for the public and private sector to work together. But if you have someone saying like, okay, we'll do this 1, 2, 3 years and show that it works, then people are more likely to collaborate and come together. So I really feel like there's a great way for us to go into the space.
Exactly. That's awesome. Thank you. Claire, the next question is for you. What are some equity-centered policies, practices, and cross-sector collaborations that you've seen are impactful, and what learnings can be applied moving forward?
Well, to be on a panel with BECMA is a real honor because I think they've done so much to bring up the issue of equity. It's been a year when so many organizations and individuals have really stepped up and put the issue of race and culture and poverty and class really squarely on the table so that it needs to be addressed. And there's a real strong correlation between school success. So we have to step in and try to make a difference there. In terms of the policies that I've actually seen and practices, certainly everything that encourages stronger collaboration among nonprofits that are working in this area. I think of how many organizations there are in the space of career to college and early education up to college attendance and the way we hand off between one organization and another, and merge that with youth development. We've been very fortunate, but the equity is a real issue, and what zip code you live in makes a difference in the city. And I think we're just, as we have these exam school and other discussions, I think things are really rising to the top in a way that is really front and center. So I hope we will do more. I know at Liberty, we've been supporting Family-Led Stability Pilot, which is a consortium of a number of organizations working with Higher Ground, but it's DSNI, it's HOPE, it's many other organizations that are dealing with the issue of family homelessness. And there's a real connection between homelessness and your family, mobility, and school performance. Obviously, if you don't know where you're living, it's really hard to focus on your homework, right? or your circumstances. So those kinds of equity issues that are very much tied to race and class and poverty need to be addressed, and there needs to be a way to do it more systemically. Then I know that particular pilot wants to go citywide. And I hope that they get some success, and certainly the superintendent has paid some attention to it. But we have in Boston between 4,000 and 5,000 students who are homeless. And so that needs to be an issue if we're talking about educational performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Claire, for that response. And I'm hearing you, stronger collaborations and making sure we're not working in silos, right? Like, what are the gaps between all of the community-based organizations, and how can we pick up where others might have left off? Curious, other thoughts from the other panelists from what Claire just mentioned?
I'll just jump in and say, I think that there are some great examples, but also just exciting room for growth, right? In collaboration, not strictly in the area of, bottom line's mission, right? Certainly, like would love to see collaboration and funding flow there, but there's a broader sort of array of policies that of course impact those outcomes for young people, right? Like everything that you might put under the banner of anti-poverty work, right? Or economic justice work. I think about the advocacy that BECMA is doing right now on a whole host of bills, but just, some of the ones that come to mind around corporate board diversity, right? And wage transparency. Those are issues where there's a real role for the corporate sector to join in the chorus of voices that are pushing for those policies that are going to alleviate poverty and close the racial wealth gap on a larger level, which of course is going to have a positive impact on educational attainment outcomes for young people.
Thank you, Senator. That definitely resonated. Jessica, I think I saw you came off mute. Did you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to add that I think accountability is really important with these collaborations as well too. And I think that the public sector has a responsibility to hold the private sector accountable to whatever extent that it can. Because I think, everyone has good intentions when it comes to equity, but without action, without systemic changes, there won't be actual progress. So holding these corporations and businesses accountable to actually do the things that they say that they're going to do is going to be really important for us to actually achieve equity.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, like what Jessica was mentioning, that the accountability from the public sector is so important to get some of this work off of the ground. I know with Success Boston, it really launched because the mayor, LA Mayor Menino, saw that students from BPS were graduating at good rates from high school, but they weren't finishing college at the same rates that other great cities like Boston were. So how he was able to push our local institutions of higher education to really come together and support our students was, the thing that really lit the fire under everybody. So without that public sector, just accountability, it'll be tough. But I think those policies can be put forward, with some great senators like Sonia Chang Diaz. So,
Yeah, I know at Liberty, we're working exclusively with Boston Public Schools, for the most part, are nonprofits that are working in Boston Public Schools. So we're really focusing, as is TBF, I know in many instances, on Black and Brown populations, if you look at the statistics, and students of color more broadly. And so their needs need to be taken into account. And it's one of the things that we speak of regularly as we review proposals and look at both the students impacted and also who's delivering the services. Makes a difference in communities.
Absolutely, absolutely. All great points. Juan, I have the next question for you. Hope you're ready. So what do you think is unique about the environment, culture, history, resources, and opportunities in Boston that foster equity-centered cross-sector collaborations?
I mean, yeah, that could be its own conversation, right? Boston is really unique. You know, it has one of the richest educational sectors in the nation, if not the world. But even with all those opportunities, there's a lot of limits and barriers. I know Claire and Jessica were mentioning about BPS and the exam schools, and Jessica was able to finish from Brighton and head to UMass Amherst. But oftentimes, you know, in our experience with Success Boston, a lot of the students who don't go to exam schools, they often are not able to attend your BUs or UMasses or MITs. So really making sure that we're able to collaborate with our private sector partners to not just look at that Mass Ave corridor where they only look at, you know, Harvard or MIT or even, you know, BU, BC, Tufts. So if the private sector is really honest about increasing diversity and inclusion and focusing on equity, they really need to start working on creating those pipelines about where they recruit, start talking to more of our partners like Ben Franklin Institute of Tech or Bunker Hill Community College or UMass Boston, where those institutions are made up primarily of students of color. And, you know, if you're looking to increase your diversity, that's a place to start.
That's real. I feel it. Jessica, is there anything you'd like to add, or do you think there are any barriers to fostering equity-centered cross-sector collaborations?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of barriers. And, you know, Boston is such a great city. We're rich in cultural diversity. We are rich and we have an abundance of resources in the city. We have the best colleges in the country and in the world in this city as well, too. So it's really a shame when we take a look at the statistics and see that although we have all of these opportunities, we just don't have equal access to them, especially when it comes to Black and Brown communities. And I think a lot of times we need to meet folks where they're at. There's issues when it comes to language access that, you know, a lot of people just don't know about the different programs and support that's available to them. And I think we need to do a better job of actually targeting groups and ensuring that the outreach is culturally competent in a way where they feel that they can trust these organizations or, you know, these sectors that can provide support and help them, you know, be in a better situation overall. So there are a lot of different barriers, but there are a lot of solutions to overcome those barriers as well, too. And when we talk about diversity, we can't just think about it in terms of numbers and getting certain people in the room, but it's like how are we actually shifting the environment to make this more welcoming to have diverse voices in the room? How are we valuing these diverse voices so that they're actually being a part of the solution and not just being put in a situation where people feel like they have to be saved. So there's a lot of different work that we have to do. And, you know, it comes from really reframing our goals. I think a lot of times our goals are tied to direct metrics and, you know, how many diverse candidates can we get here? Can we fill this job with a person of color? But that one person of color is not going to solve all of our issues of equity. So how are we actually engaging with these groups in a real way to be able to have impact on the change that we want to see?
Absolutely. I hear you both. It's awareness and access, right? And making sure that it is active inclusion. It's not just like to represent that one person. And I see the same thing happening, you know, with us at Bottom Line. These are conversations that we're asking ourselves all the time, right? Whether it's representation with our staff, but also how are we reaching the communities that needs us the most, and how are we sending that message, right? Because I think that's really important. And Jessica, you hit on a really good point. It's not about trying to save and change the community, is making sure that they are aware of what the next steps and where they can go and what they can do as well. So I really appreciate that conversation. I definitely want to hear more of your thoughts on this. But first, Jessica, I'm going to go back to you again. Just curious to hear, what do you think we can do as a network of individuals, community organizations, and companies to help facilitate this cross-sector work?
Yeah, so collaboration is super important, right? But collaboration can only be successful if it's grounded in a shared vision. So it's important that we're not only just looking at the issues that are in front of us, but also looking at what do the solutions look like when they come to life? What does it look like when we achieve education and economic equity? And when we have that shared vision, then it'll be a lot easier to get to that overall end goal. So I think a lot of times when we work in coalition, we need to have these exercises and these processes and the community input to see what are we actually fighting for? What does it look like? How does it feel? What impact does it have on the communities? Are these things that people actually want, as opposed to things that we think that they want? So getting that vision down is super important. And I would say another really, really important thing that we can do as community members, as professionals, as elected officials, as leaders, is that we need to rethink the way we see equity, and we need to look at it from a more holistic approach. It's not just about finances. It's not just about how much money you're making. It's about, are you hungry? You know, is food access, is food scarcity actually impacting your family? Do you get to go home and eat, or are you only having a meal at school? Do you have to work and you can't go to college because you're helping to take care of your family? So there's just a lot of other issues that we need to think about when we're thinking in terms of equity. And it can't just be something that is very simple. It has to be something that is very, very holistic and across the board. And community input is so important. Community partnerships are very, very important. We need to have the people who are most affected at the tables leading the conversations, and the stakeholders need to take a step back and listen and take notes and really see what are people implementing in their own homes, what are people implementing in their communities that stakeholders like corporations, stakeholders like the public sector can actually scale. So maybe it's not creating a new solution from scratch, but seeing what is working in these communities and how can we scale it so that we can actually have a greater impact on wider communities overall. Because a lot of the times, people who are most impacted by inequities, like, they have no choice but to be super creative for their own survival. So a lot of times we have the solutions. People think that when certain people graduate from college, they're not necessarily an exception to the rule. They're figuring out a way that works for them. So how can we look at that path that they chose to take and choose to scale that in a way so that we can continue to impact multiple people who are in that situation as well too? So having that vision, very, very important. And then also just thinking about equity from a holistic lens and not just in a silo.
So awesome. You got me so excited, Jessica, but I need to remember I'm a moderator, not part of the panel. So I'm going to throw it back at the rest of the panelists, to hear your thoughts, especially on the question, and if you have any other additions to Jessica's response.
I'll jump in here and say, in terms of coalition work, that I think I found many times over in my experience, both as an organizer and now as a legislator, that sometimes it just really helps to, what I like to call, go on a date with each other, right? And you don't have to figure out the whole, 20-year plan and, make sure everything's 100% matched, right? Because you're probably never going to achieve 100% match with a coalition partner. But that just one of my favorite organizer sayings is never do nothing, right? Even if you can't figure out the whole thing, just pick one thing that you can work together on, across those sector lines. And it might be, it might be food security, right? It might be fare-free transit access. It might be, the Work and Family Mobility Act, it might be voting rights, whatever, but that if, once you get that experience of being in a trench together with somebody, another organization or another set of people working on an issue, then it becomes easier, you sort of build that muscle and it becomes easier to work on the next thing and the next thing together.
I agree. The trust factor is really important in terms of going forward. And I know Bottom Line is really focused on getting people into college specifically, and through college. But we're also, I think, owed something to the adults in the community who perhaps didn't go to college, but still need to figure out how to get a living wage.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been kind of enthusiastic about some of the models that I've seen coming forward that are looking at training, but not the kind of job training that used to be the case where you'd be, destined to be at an entry-level position, but some of the job training, be it in coding or tech or other things that are going to actually allow people to provide a reasonable salary for their families, because that's part of this. You talked about the holistic aspect of the work, Jessica, and you're absolutely right. Poverty doesn't just affect the parents or the adults in the house or the guardians in the house, it affects the children most directly. And so what can we do to give people the opportunities to take advantage of and make those opportunities available to get into better positions that also are fulfilling for them, so that it's affirming.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Juan, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's everyone's really mentioned, and would really double click on what Jessica mentioned about the holistic wraparound support and really needing to make sure that everyone we serve, that their basic needs are met, because everyone was talking about how if you don't have food at home, how are you going to study? How are you going to be able to focus at school? Like, oh, why is that student falling asleep? Oh, it's because they were working late to help out their family. Like, I think there's so many reasonable answers to the student that often has been underserved and then is underperforming according to the school's standards. But if we pay attention and make sure that their basic needs are met, then we can increase the growth and success of the people we serve. And all those things have been really exacerbated during this past 2 years now. So I know that's something that we've been making sure as we move forward is one of the main central parts of our work, just focusing on equity and basic needs as the foundation of our work, and then bringing on whatever comes after.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you all. And I keep remembering one of the things that Jessica, you mentioned is like making sure we get the community input, right? Like what do they need? And yes, we can make an observation about students falling asleep or being hungry and want to do something about it, but what are they saying? Like what is the root cause of all of that? So thank you all for sharing. I didn't want to forget, I want to circle back to the question around what you all think is unique about the environment, culture, history, resources, and opportunities in Boston that foster equity-centered cross-sector collaborations. I know Claire and Senator Sonia, I didn't give you a chance to add your thoughts, so I wanted to circle back to that to see if you had something to add.
Well, I'll say, in Boston specifically, and I think this applies to the state as a whole as well, but particularly for Boston, there's actually that, we sort of, I think, sometimes get used to feeling like we are operating in a land of scarcity, because so many of the students and the families that we are serving are living in deep scarcity. But actually we are in Boston in a land of enormous capacity and resources and wealth. And so just sort of always like remembering that, that actually we have quite a bit of resources in Boston, and to not sort of, drink the Kool-Aid. I think when people are telling us that there's not enough. That's one. And then I would say the following is more Massachusetts wide, right? And not just Boston, but that is somewhat unique to Massachusetts. And I find this a lot in the policymaking work I do on Beacon Hill, is that it is both a challenge and a tool, I guess, that we have. It is a challenge because in Massachusetts, many times think we're doing okay, in a way that masks, deep inequities and, profound struggles at the individual and family level, because our averages are high. Because our highs are very high. And so it, pulls up our statewide averages. So there's a lot of sort of ability for us to tell ourselves a story, right, about how we're doing in Massachusetts that is not really true, and is not accurate to, again, the individual and the family level experience. So that's a challenge, right, we have to do that work of, pulling back the layer of averages and looking at what's really going on. I think it is also can be it's a tool in our toolbox, because educationally, right, just looking at educational attainment, we have cracked the code in Massachusetts, right? Like, we know how to achieve these tremendous highs. So the formula is right there, the playbook is right there, and we just have to have the political will to replicate that formula for everybody, right? And share that success with everybody broadly in our state. And not to put too fine a point on it, but basically the formula is don't be poor. So, if we can help people get a ladder out of poverty, we are going to take a humongous bite out of so many of these challenges, but we have the playbook right there.
Jessica, I guess what, Jeanette as well, I think what I would say is we've been fortunate in that Melking and others kind of gave us a playbook about how to work together in community. We have enormous resources. We have, and much of that work was replicated again this past summer, as people really took to the street and spent a lot of time in meetings and on FaceTime with each other, trying to go deep into solutions. So I think we are in a position to build upon a lot of that trust that we mentioned before, and the goals of many, many community organizations and many individuals in terms of their vision, whether it's health disparities, educational disparities, job training. These conversations have had a real depth to them in the last 2 years. So I think it is really a question of putting some action behind some of the plans that have come forward there.
I like that. Thank you all. Are there any last thoughts or ideas you'd like to leave us with before we move into the Q&A section from our audience?
I mean, I think bouncing off of what we were just mentioning about, where the gaps in the racial gap and economic gap is so stark in the city of Boston. I think that's true for a lot of Massachusetts, like Senator was saying, where, something I'm actually telling a few people pretty recently is that this next week is actually my last week at the Boston Foundation. I'll be heading over to be the executive director of Steps to Success Brookline, which is a program that supports families and students at the Housing Authority in Brookline. And, Brookline's seen as this very wealthy town, but there are still gaps where there's a lot of families, a lot of young people who need a lot of support, often are more likely to be people of color. And, without the program like Steps to Success, they don't have many more options towards a more level playing field. So I think having those, being aware of that and making sure that we are looking at our rich towns like Boston, Brookline, Arlington, and seeing that there are folks there that need help. That's just, we really need to make sure we pay attention to that.
That's awesome. Congratulations, Juan. We're so excited for you. And that's an amazing illustration of what the senator was talking about and helping us to pull back the layers of averages, right? Like knowing what we know about some of these areas, like, are we really getting to the issue? Are we really taking care of everybody in the same way? So thank you. We're so glad for you. I'm going to move us to the question, the Q&A, and one of our Bottom Line alum, Max Claremont, is going to kick us off with the first question, and he is the Senior Project Lead, Chicagoland Vaccine Partnership at Partners in Health, and serves as a member of our Massachusetts Leadership Council. Thank you so much, Max, and welcome.
Great, thanks for having me. This has been an incredible conversation. I have like 2 questions, and I know I'm supposed to stick with one, but you can choose which one you respond to. I just been motivated by some stuff happening this morning. But the first question, and the bias here is I have spent a lot of my time, professional career, working in public health. And I think I'm curious, I think I learned in the past year the link between education and health. And I think all the things that we're hearing about the pandemic, and there's still a lot of work for us to do, but the narrative that has exposed a lot of like issues around poverty and education and access. And I'm curious if you've been inspired by any collaboration across sector that has come out or emerged kind of around now as we kind of recover, think about recovery in the pandemic and addressing these long held issues. And so I'm curious if anyone has any like positive examples of something in that realm. And then the second question is really kind of reflecting on Nikole Hannah-Jones, who there was an announcement this morning that she, with everything happening at UNC, and she's going to Howard University. And I'm just reflecting on, we spent a lot of time thinking about pipeline and college to career, but in many cases, folks have to deal with being a part of many institutions that just don't recognize their worth and their value. And I'm trying to figure out, like, what does support look like for folks like me who have benefited from Bottom Line, went to a college, have kind of 10 years into my professional career, but still have to deal with this institutional kind of structural racism. And how do we make sure some of these supports that we cover people with from K to 12 and college to career kind of continue on as they kind of navigate all these kinds of systems and institutions? So those are the two questions, and happy to get a response on either of them.
I'll jump in on your first question was wonderful, and I've already forgotten what it was because your second question was so compelling that it just filled my mind. So I'll try and tackle that one and say, this is a very stark memory that I have from early in my, professional life as an organizer, as an activist, and then as a legislator. And I think it actually first story took place before I ran for office, but was still in the political organizing field and was looking to when Governor Patrick first came into office, and he was starting to put his cabinet secretaries and high level appointments in place, and people were sort of watching, like people like me, young progressive, women of color, were watching to see sort of what's he gonna do? It's gonna be great, and started looking around and thinking like, okay, well, who even would this new Patrick administration appoint to all of these positions? And looking around and saying, man, there is just a really sad dearth of high-powered women and women of color, who are just sort of visible, ready, to be plugged in and plugged into these positions. And not to say they don't exist, but right, just not as visible as this, as is some of my feminist friends say, the thick layer of men, right? Who are, it's not so much a glass ceiling as a thick layer of men. And then looking to my peers to create that support network for ourselves when we realized that there weren't as many role models as we wished for at the sort of layer or two above us. Realizing, we'll be the ones we've been waiting for each other, and just forming an informal support network, right, amongst ourselves to be each other's mentors and cheering squads. And that for many years really fed me as a professional. And then the other example that I'll hold up that I'm just so proud of them is in the State House. This doesn't stretch to every sector, but in the State House just recently, about a year ago now, staffers of color in the State House started this organization called Beacon Block. And it was, it's a more official and organized version, I think, of the thing that I did earlier in my life, where they created this network for each other, to be a support for one another, but also to very explicitly advocate within their institution for institutional changes that would help, broaden the pipeline and make the experience, more welcoming and more supportive of young professionals of color who are coming up in that workspace. So those are just, two, I don't know, say islands of wonderfulness that I would hold up to hopefully give you some hope.
Yeah, and thank you, Senator Chang Diaz, for the work you've done so consistently with the Black and Latino elected officials as well. You've been very stand up in terms of the points you put forward in your positions. I do think that Max's questions are quite compelling. Certainly almost, well, I wouldn't say almost all, but very, very many corporations now have employee resource groups and diversity initiatives. Liberty has a deep one. And what I would say is to look at the authenticity of the support you get in those situations and try to find out people who are going to be good mentors, but who are actually going to be truthful about the situations within the company and try to pave the road for you by helping to connect you to both internal training and also external affirmations and lifting you up. Because I think you're right, Senator, that there are often people who have the skills and who have the experience, but don't get the publicity. So they're not on the list at Boston Magazine or whatever, although it looked a lot better this year, I have to say. But the point is, you know, where does that acclaim come from? Does it come from our community? Does it come from yourself? You know, where do you get the affirmation that makes you feel that you are confident enough to do the job that you know you can do? And just to quickly answer your second question, the health disparities, Liberty was very pleased to be one of the funders behind the effort that Michael Curry put together for the community health centers in terms of, and so was Boston Foundation and Klarman and a number of other funders. But that's the kind of model I think that is a very helpful model, because Michael clearly has his ear to the ground and knows what the needs are in the various communities. It was peer-led in terms of helping to make the decisions about how the dollars were distributed, and the money came out early enough and quickly enough that it could actually do some good while they waited for federal dollars to flow. So I think those are some of the kind of efforts in terms of looking at health disparities that can make a difference. Flexible money is exactly what's needed in moments like COVID, and also just for regular equitable delivery of services.
Mm. Can I just make a shout out here for a request that I don't know if anybody is doing this nowadays, but back when I was a WE activist, one of the foundations in Boston used to host it was like a job fair, but for board seats at local nonprofits. And that's actually, I think that might be how I found my way to the Mass Vote board back in the day. And it fell by the wayside, and I haven't seen it restarted for some years, although I'll hope that I'm wrong about that. And this isn't exactly, you know, the question that you asked, Max, but it's a place where I'm just looking at your tile in my screen here and thinking, you know, there's like, how can I plug Max in? Like, I want to get this talent, you know, and put in stuff. And then there's got to be, you know, 20 more of you just in the bottom line, you know, alumni alone, right? And there's so, you know, we panelists could probably name the same 20 people who are, you know, our brother and sister activists in sort of in the board space or in, you know, sort of organizational leadership, who are spread super thin and are asked to do everything. And then we need to get the next generation right into these slots so that we can share the load more, and so that we can be building the team and the pipeline. So this is just my pitch for whether it's Boston Foundation or Liberty or somebody else to, you know, start that board fair up again and have it be, you know, particularly pitched to, you know, BIPOC folks of color coming up who we need to find you, we need to plug you in.
That's awesome, Senator. And that's such a great segue to one of the questions I saw in the chat from Sharon Driscoll, asking about what are some of the plans you think most deserve action. And I think you just named one of the plans, like here's one thing that we can do to start putting stuff together. And I'm curious if others on the panel would want to highlight another plan for action.
Well, I just wanted to say that BECMA, we're doing a lot of work on the legislative side to diversify boards, but we're also working with our membership base as well too, to ensure that Black professionals, Black community members, Black business owners have an opportunity to be on these boards as well. So I definitely check out BECMA and consider, just a small pitch here, but definitely consider becoming a member of BECMA, because you do get access to a lot of these opportunities and networks that you may not have had access to without the organization. But as far as plans goes, I think it's one thing that was really, really helpful for me growing up was having really great paid internships when I was in high school. And that was really important because it helped to not only make me feel like college was possible, but it helped me actually dibble and dabble into different career fields that I wouldn't normally meet people in on an everyday basis, not in my community, not in my household, and not at school either. So I think that exposure at a young age and kind of showing younger students what's possible for their future is really, really important. And I also think, I don't know if this is necessarily a direct plan, but rethinking education as well too, where it's not necessarily being college educated, but really investing in our vocational schools, really investing in trade schools, because college isn't for everyone, especially with the student loan debt crisis right now. It doesn't always make sense for people to go to college, but what about people that want to own a hair salon? What about people that want to be electricians and plumbers that are very, very lucrative careers? That can help people build generational wealth, but how are we actually connecting young people to these opportunities and supporting them through these opportunities so that they can complete it and get access to a really great career moving forward? So I think, rethinking education where it's not just about college, but also about trade schools and vocational programs as well too.
Awesome, awesome. You all are making it hard for me to stay a moderator, but I will. There's so many comments and thoughts. We have another question from Laura Goudine, Director of Wealth and Planning at Eaton Vance Water Oak Advisors, which is a valued bottom line corporate partner. So go ahead and take yourself off mute and ask your question, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been an incredible opportunity just to listen to this panel. So a question that is sort of drawn from what several of you have said, needing buy-in from all the stakeholders, including corporations. And within corporations, there's this, obviously this management level, and of course, they're sort of best positioned to make changes around practice and policy. But I wonder if you've seen good examples or can share a vision for an example of how employees within employee resource groups or cross employee resource groups or elsewhere within corporations can internally network and engage with management to advocate and support some of this cross collaboration that you're sharing with us today. And I would say especially kind of at that after that, the thick layer of men, kind of sort of post pipeline, how we as colleagues and employees who may be hiring and may not be hiring in a position to hire, but can advocate within our organizations.
I guess it says the only but I'm sure, Jessica, you probably have some insights in terms of what you've seen at BECMA as well, and Senator Chang Diaz. Liberty has a deep connection to diversity, and we've got a really good leader in Don Fraser Bonnet, who is an EVP at Liberty and heads our diversity initiative. And she just was recognized nationally for the level of her work. But I would say what's important in her work is that she has authentic and real buy-in from leadership in the company, from our CEO through all the top leaders. And I think that's what has to happen, that it has to be both what comes up from the employees and what's happening among senior leaders, because otherwise the employees are putting themselves out there in risky situations without much support. So it really does have to be authentic. We've got a number of learning opportunities that our employee resource groups put up every day for people to cross-collaborate. We've got allies. We've got a very deep bench of people who are studying it, and really living the issues of race and culture and inclusion more broadly, accessibility, gender orientation, everything is, we've got a women's group, all of the, you've got Pride, we've got all of the organizations that you would expect given the population that Liberty hires from. I think what's important is that there really is a cross connection among the groups, the employee resource groups, and that they do feel empowered within the company. It's not just for show, and that's what makes the difference. And it's one of the reasons that some of the people stay there, because that company commitment is there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claire. I have one last question that I want to ask, and I think we have about 1 or 2 minutes for the answer. It's from Maria. She says we are looking to benchmark employee diversity and would like to use local population data, data on ethnicity and race as a start. What are local resources you would recommend to find this information?
I'll just say I mean, we're about to have, we have the most recent census data, but even if you're in an off year from, the decennial census, the US Census Bureau is pretty good at putting out sort of mid-decade data called I think it's the American Communities Survey, the ACS. So I think that's sort of the go-to data set for benchmarking local population.
And I would just add that while data is really, really important, I think making meaningful connections with community stakeholders is also another pathway that would be really important for setting these diversity benchmarks, having conversations with people from the community, having conversations with people that work with the community to kind of see not only, who can we hire, but how can we create a pipeline so that we are able to hire folks in the future? What is it that they need to be able to become, a working professional, et cetera, et cetera. So data is important, but also don't forget to have that human aspect as well too in conversations and build relationships and trust in different communities as well.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. It is 1:29 and I want to keep us on time, but I'm so grateful for such an amazing discussion. Thank you so much, Senator Juan, Claire, Jessica, for volunteering as panelists and for sharing such amazing insights. I have so many coin terms and I love it, Senator. Never do nothing. It is time for action, and I want to make sure that we all continue this conversation, but also we act on this. So thank you to all of our other Relentless allies, Bottom Line alumni, staff, and our community and corporate partners for joining us today. And I hope you all enjoyed yourself, and hopefully you're leaving here with something new that you've learned and are considering ways to help foster equity-centered public and private partnership moving forward. Before we all head off, I'd just like to call back something that the senator said, which I love, and I just said it, but we never ever do nothing. As we continue to have these conversations, just keep that in mind. Let's move into action and support our communities. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks again.